Oh, well, hello, and welcome to another Saturday Night Synthesis. I'm your host, Alex, in Baltimore, Maryland. If it sounds like I'm shouting, it's just because I've been deafened by cicadas. It's a real thing. They're super cool and also very gross. But you know what's super cool and not very gross? That song. That's kind of damning with faint praise, I guess. But, I thought it was really good. I really liked it. And I think you're going to like everything else we have for this show, too, because we've got a really special guest for you tonight. Also from New York, Carnal Ex is one of my favorites from the Earth Modular Society scene. I'm really looking forward to it. Carnal Ex, say hi. How's it going?
Hey guys, how are you? Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I love it. I love the piece. I really love the intro piece, and I look forward to to see like the rest of the show. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. And we're going to get into that piece and kind of get into it with Carnal Ex in just a little bit. Before we do that, a little bookkeeping. Do people even have books anymore? Anyway, if you have any comments on the show, you really like my rambling discursive asides, leave them in the comments of the episode and we'll get back to you about them. In addition, you want to go on Instagram, want to check the episode notes, you'll see our Instagram handle at Saturday Night Synthesis. You'll get clips of the shows. I'll let you know who the guests are coming up. Also, Carnal Ex has social media, a presence on the internet, as you might have imagined. And we have links to all that on there, too. And while you're there, clicking on the buttons on the screen, wherever you might be watching this, like and subscribe, because we like you and subscribe to the view that we want you to watch more of our shows. So just like and subscribe, and we're going to be great. Now, without further ado, proving that, unlike Samson, his hair was not the source of his power, Frederick Foxtrott.
Just not expecting that one. Hey, everybody, how you doing? Alex, I missed you, bud. How is the heat treating you? Is it hot down there?
Oh, it was like 90 degrees. It wasn't too bad. We got a kiddie pool. I drank all the other booze in the house, so I drank a tall boy of Mead sitting in the pool. Mead is always it was pretty good. It's always a little bit of a disappointment. I'm always like, this is going to be so great. It's made out of honey. And then you're like, no, it's just kind of...
It's like of fables and legends.
Yeah, right? Like I want to maybe, if I just, sacked some sort of English village or something, I'd like it better. But I did have a koozie. I was living that koozie life.
Well, that
had a tall boy koozie and the tall boy can. So actually it's pretty good. Charm City Mead Works was literally the best mead I've ever had. So go check them out. Awesome. This is not a paid advertisement.
Well, we have our ACs installed now in the house. I was thinking of the other day, I kind of feel like the day that you install your air conditioner is like, if we were back in times where we were creating new traditions, this would be like a minor holiday, right? It's like you mark the passage of time by this time that you agree that you put in the air conditioner.
When you stop fighting about whether to put the air conditioner in, and you both mutually decide that it's time to do it.
It's like that's the time. And it's like sometime. It's like a kind of a nebulous time, but when it happens, and this is only because my family had such a strong Christmas tradition of the tree, the trotting out of the tree, and that whole, there's something, I guess, most akin to putting up a tree is actually putting in the ACs. I don't know.
Yeah, you gotta get them in the basement, like whatever weird, they got cobwebs on them, they're gross, or wherever you're storing them.
Yeah. Well, anyways, tonight I'm really excited about what's happening throughout our many months of putting this show together. We've been, I think, super fortunate that we ask really talented players and they just keep on saying yes. And tonight is no different. Carnal Ex is on the show tonight, and he's another excellent synthesist, as Alex said, from New York City, my favorite county in the USA, Kings County. Carnal Ex is another one of those players with like dope graphics. So we're going to be really excited about what we're going to see for a super big treat there. So.
Oh, and it's our 20th show, Internet.
That's right. This is our 20th
show.
Yeah. So our 20th official show. Right.
Our 20th episode.
That's right.
Clogging up the tubes of the internet with our discursive, synthetic nonsense. Yeah. So let's talk about that song a little bit. What were you doing there? I really was into that. My favorite part was like about 7 minutes in, you do a little breakdown with like the rhythm. You're doing something on the BeatStep Pro.
Oh yeah, it's the roller. Yeah, we'll get into that. I think by now a lot of people might be familiar with, especially the more kind of dancier or poppier stuff that I glitch out, or it's definitely has melody. It's a lot of melody. It's like hyper melodic, yet still kind of maybe not. You have to concentrate to get all the layers, which is so I have all these layers that are coming on top of each other. And I think that that is obvious. And so certainly you start off with just the mother 32, adding a bass line with the little Phatty. For a while, I've been trying to keep it to just the modular, not bringing any key synths in, just as a matter of discipline to try to really, you're always striving to get better. And one of the ways you can do that is to not rely on the pre-patches and rely on the key synths. But also at the same time with a looper, which I have an infinity looper. So I had my Yamaha give us a little accordion and then some strings with the microKorg, and I just loop that. And then the infinity looper I have allows me to kind of come in and out with each one of those loops. And then you have several more melodies, one coming through the circuit bent VCO, which I always go back to that one. It's such a great oscillator. And then that's going through the Mimeophone to kind of put some stereo spread on that. So with the BeatStep Pro, for those who don't know, I can get a melody going on, and then I can just save that to another slot and then change, add some accents, add some higher notes or whatever. And that allows me to then go back and forth and have roughly the same melody, but then with variation. Even when I have 4 different melodies going on at the same time, kind of weaving in and out of each other with volume. And as I always say, like synthesis is like 50% volume control. I also have different variations coming in and out of each other as well. I want people to kind of realize that what's happening is I'm always going in there and choosing another kind of variation. And if I wanted to, I think if I was smart about it, I could probably chain that in BeatStep. I could probably assign a song and just go through and just memorize the pattern or whatever. But I think live play is always more exciting and always more nervous that you can fuck shit up. So, of course, I have another melody coming in with the Erica Synth Pico VCO, which just is a phenomenal little 3 HP module that allows you to really choose all sorts of different waveforms. So I'm not even sure what I chose. I was already playing full blast when I kind of chose one. So, and then as you mentioned, Alex, when I was at the, kind of the breakdown, I think is what you called it. There's what's called a roller pad, which allows you to kind of freeze on the last like quarter note. It allows you to kind of take a snippet of your sequence and kind of loop that back. It's something that you have to get good at. You have to kind of practice with it because, of course, you can come in and get the wrong one, and you're always taking that risk. I did it tonight because I've been playing with it for a while, and I figured I might as well just try it out. And I think it sounded pretty. It worked really well with the beat pattern, and of course, not only does it do the beat pattern, but it also does those melodies as well. So the melodies that are being played out of the BeatStep Pro then also kind of have these micro loops and resets as well. Having songs like repetitive is actually very good for me. I love that. I love repetitive songs. I love hearing how it changes and how it evolves in very subtle ways. I think a lot of people's, including mine, one of my worst fears is having the audience just saying, this sounds like the same 3 notes over and over again or something like that. And with any song where you're layering so many melodies, I think it's really important to kind of keep that variation alive. And hopefully I achieved it. And if not, I think that's definitely a song that I could return to and maybe sharpen up for maybe a kind of studio recording. But.
No, I think it really did what you're talking about. The whole back half is like really fresh and really, you're talking about what sounds like, a Frederick Foxtrott tune. And part of it is the sounds you use. And then you just played a little bit of the intro and I was like, what is that? And I remembered Future Islands. Do you ever listen to Future Islands, which is like this,
long time ago, I feel like.
Yeah, because they're out of Annapolis, I think, but they're out here in Baltimore. And like, that's a tone they, in a lot of their songs, they have that. And I was like, wait, where's that from? And I was like, all right, it's Future Islands. Pyotr Garbachenek is here. He was our guest last week and he's in the audience tonight. When you started playing the sub Phatty, the Moog, he's like, it's a sub Phatty. He like blew up the chat. And he was like, he called that one. But he had a couple questions about it too. So yeah, sure. I think maybe let's just throw it out. Carnal Ex too. If you have any questions about that song, let's just get into it.
I just loved it. I loved it. I loved the second half. And I think to the point you were saying, it was evolving in a very interesting way. Yeah, like you could feel the build up in the second half, just going up and up and up. Repetitive, but not boring, increasing like this crescendo. So
I always think they're unexpected. The signature Frederick Foxtrott build that you don't know where it's going to go. It goes someplace you're not expecting it to, and that's kind of the expected unexpected.
Regarding the little Phatty, it's so funny because it's just like a single note that you're playing along with that kick drum, and it's just such a. I mean, I think everyone loves the Moog bass sound. I don't know. That was my first synthesizer that I ever got was as a gift. So. Whenever I get a chance to use it, even in simple ways, I do. So
I think Piotr, you had a question too about how he clocked that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, great song. I mean, it was evolving in amazing ways, and I really liked the vibe of it. My question to you is, what's the master clock for everything? Because you mentioned the BeatStep Pro, you're using it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I actually have a pedal on the floor called Master Controller, which is just a MIDI clock. It's like a guitar pedal. I built it from a kit sent to me by Molten Voltage. It's meant to have a MIDI clock, but also be able to control different parameters on anything that allows kind of MIDI control of parameters. A lot of pedal these days, a lot of guitar pedals are becoming more and more like, they're accepting kind of MIDI to be able to control the what would usually be controlled on the pots and on the knobs. And that is actually going through a drum brute, which I have muted and silent. There's no track running. And then that is going on to the BeatStep Pro, which is then going on to my drum machine, which is a Dr. Rhythm 670 from the 90s. Boss. It's one of my favorite drum machines. And then, so basically the BeatStep Pro then kind of becomes the new hub where it sends it over to the Mother 32, which then is the main kind of source of clock for the rest of the modules. If you can see in the upper right hand corner of the BeatStep Pro coming up through, those are all your pitch, velocity, and your gate. From the drum brute, I have an out going into my Infinity Looper, Pigtronics Infinity Looper, which is allowing me to have that clock. The little Phatty, that's just running on a loop. So I just click in with the loop and start that going. And then all my key synths are actually all coming into a single mixer on the floor. And then that single mixer is one channel into the Infinity Looper.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, Frederick. Have you felt any jittering issues with like using MIDI for clocking?
Maybe. I mean, in many ways, sometimes a lot of my sound is it's already a little jittery. It's already a little glitching on the edges. The edges are never very clean. I find that and I think most people find this obviously, but it's when you're recording in the studio that you have your cleanest sounds because you don't have to rely on everything being kind of played at once. The master controller, like I said, I put it together and I am not a genius of any kind of soldering. And every once in a while, like it'll go from like 120 to 121 or 95 to 96. It'll actually change on the screen. When I first started noticing it happening, I was a little put off by it. But then I was kind of like, it gives it a little more of a, not many people can tell the difference between 120 and 121, but after a while you kind of can, and then you begin to hear it. But it's almost like, if you were to listen to like Led Zeppelin or any kind of live drummer, like they actually wildly kind of go out of time throughout a song. So I don't know. I don't really pay attention. Not that I don't pay attention to it, but it's not something I no longer concern myself with. And do you notice that with MIDI a lot? Is that why you asked?
Yeah, because when I was syncing up my laptop, I like to have a hybrid system. I do believe in having the best of both worlds kind of thing. And so I do integrate my laptop quite a bit with my rig.
Yeah. A lot of people do that.
Syncing the laptop with my rig was a little bit of a challenge at first, in part because I didn't really understand what I needed to do. Now in hindsight, it's like, and I need to do all this stuff, but I remember the first time I tried, I was pumping out MIDI to a module, and then I was using that as a clock, and it was just a little bit noticeably all over the place in terms of jitter. And I remember I went to Reddit somewhere, and I asked, I think on the modular sub, and I think Touche. I don't know how you say his name, Touche. He's the guy that has the biggest freaking modular system that you've seen, other than probably Richard Devine. Like, this guy has like his entire room, just like, massive, Eurorack system. And he kind of pointed me out to, he was like, oh yeah, you should look into jitter. He suggested me to start clocking with CV. And so now I clock my entire system, not with MIDI, but with CV. And it works amazing. And, not to say that MIDI doesn't work. It works perfectly fine. For me specifically, I had some issue with it. And triggering the CV, everything kind of fixed it. It's not also uncommon, but I'm just curious always to hear how people sync that, because sometimes it becomes a little bit too noticeable,
And also to clarify one thing, when the MIDI gets to the BeatStep Pro, that's where it stops. Then from there on, it's all control voltage. So maybe it's a little bit more cohesive, because the MIDI is really only controlling the drum machine and the BeatStep Pro. If those two things are kind of in sync, then all of the CV coming out of the BeatStep Pro will be gelled.
Right.
So while everything is in its origins kind of routed through MIDI, after the BeatStep Pro, we're only working with CV. So, and then also working with a computer, which might have latency issues that one thing I have no idea is integrating a computer into the rig. That would be a kind of next, I think I originally started coming from the position of, fuck that. I want to get out of the computer. I want nothing to do with the computer. That was a kind of like ethic that I had.
It's a legit point of view, because some people don't want to fucking work with a computer, even, because they work with a computer all day. And that's fine.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like I said, my approach is more like a hybrid. Why would I spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars and use all this real estate in terms of HP to make like a drum beat, when I could just fire up my computer and program some MIDI, and it's going to sound amazing with velocities and all this crazy stuff, So for me, it's more like an efficiency matter, I like to use each system for what it's good at. The computer is really bad at kind of like the way I think is like non-linear stuff, because voltage tends to sometimes just go super crazy in a way that computers sometimes cannot emulate very well, I feel. And so that's what I use the rig for. And then the laptop for the kind of stuff that laptops are really good at, DAWs, If you ever go down that lane of trying to consolidate both systems, the thing that really made my system really tied together was I had to delay the master clock from the DAW. If your master clock is the rig, it's different, but my master clock is actually the laptop. And so because of all the IO latencies that you get, I had to delay in the clock device. There's a tiny thing that allows you to delay by milliseconds, the clock. And I had to test by, error, like trial and error. And I pinpointed to I just did it again today with some of the things, 7.5 milliseconds. So I had a 10 millisecond delay. And when you sync the kick drum in your DAW and you have a sequencer, the same kick drum at the same time, you always hear that mini, it's not perfect. And I realized that the way to make it perfect was to delay the clock by some 10, 12, whatever milliseconds. That was a huge aha moment for me. And that's when I learned that clocks have delay and that you can use that to compensate manually for the latency IO inherent to all the ADA stuff. And it's a never-ending process, really. I'm still learning.
Well, all right, guys. Well, I think now it's time to hear a little bit of Carnal Ex's music. We're going to play it right now, and we'll see you guys on the other side, and we'll talk to him about the song and about some other stuff, too. Oh,
that is awesome. I could talk for we could talk for an hour just on that.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Welcome again to the show. And thank you so much for creating that for us. That was amazing. That's powerful. And it was a lot of fun too. I really liked it.
Thank you guys for having me. I love that you guys create this space for like this weird shit that guys doing, you know, I love it. So thank you guys so much for having me.
The video, I can't talk about the music, but I could talk about the video. It was such a cool video effect. Is that like a chroma key or is that?
It's not a chroma key, it's a luma key.
Yeah.
And so that's me discovering luma keys recently. And now I'm just luma keying everything, all the things. It's a very powerful technique that, you know, I'm just scratching the surface. And so I mask the darks and I have this like projection in the background basically. So it's all luma key. I haven't played around with chroma key yet. And that's kind of like what I want to do next. Yeah, good call.
When I'm watching the video behind, I find myself having just enough clarity of it to be able to follow what's going on. And then I become kind of entranced in the video before. And the next thing you know, like an arm will sweep through and like then you kind of pop back out and realize, and not only that, but like the whole aesthetic itself with the skull. What book? I want to know what book it was resting on. I was trying to.
That was the Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes.
Okay, Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. Okay,
I love that book.
And then the other thing was you're like entirely metal, Carnal Ex, and like that definitely that belongs on a black metal like.
That's me being really, really bad at like design, and so I have to rely on like free fonts. And so,
is it like a Dark Throne font or something?
No, it's more like a satanic font or something like that. You know, it's like a death metal kind of thing.
That's very cool. No, the whole aesthetic. Was there something to the choice of the movie that you had playing alongside it? Does the narrative or something like that, is that playing into what's going on there, or what was the choice of the video for?
I think the answer is yes in the end, in the final product. But when I start looking for material, I don't have a very clear vision of where I want to take the piece, right? And so the only thing I have in mind is I need a cool video that is public domain. And I need it to be public domain because that's just a restriction that we all have, right? I'm looking for something that just grabs me in terms of the music that I'm doing at that specific moment. And so this video was so old sci-fi, ridiculous, like gender, like normative, like with the sci-fi, you know, it has a rocket at some point, and this is all like in the Cold War period. And so
yeah, that's what I love about old sci-fi, especially that era, is that it has so many Cold War kind of narratives embedded in the visuals themselves. And not only that, but also kind of a sense of a clean or moral colonialism. I think old sci-fi has all these really potent themes you can use against the theme. You know, you can actually take it up and then kind of let it speak to that.
And it's also a little bit about finding something that has a contrast with a very kind of like contemporary noise, like weird contemporary thing, and going back to something that is old, that has very clearly imagery and narratives that don't belong in our world anymore. And there's this tension between what is current and what is aesthetics, and what is noise and what is not aesthetic, and then what is the current narrative. So for me, it's like this multiple things happening at the same time, and it all goes back to which public domain video can I find, you know? I feel like there's a trove of resources that are in the public domain that I really want to explore now as, you know, as a way of paying, what's the word, homage? Is that how you say it in English? Homenaje in Spanish. Yep. You know, because these things were made by talented, smart people back in the day, and now I can use them. And that's like a privilege, is like a future guy privilege of sorts, you know? And so...
Right, I like that, future guy privilege.
Well, and they're always so too, like, they're always so kinetic, right? It's like there's things to look at, and people are moving, and so it looks, when you play a song, it does the trick where your brain lines up the visual with the audio. Like, it'll be like, oh, it's doing it at the same time, even though they're not really doing it the same. You know, like your brain wants to find that pattern.
And if you choose the right parts, it becomes like a very interesting, appealing visual stuff. And so your brain can bounce back and forth between the video and the audio, because the audio is pretty dense. And, you know, sometimes it just becomes like one massive, you know, thing of noise. And so if you make the viewer kind of like look at the video and like focus on the video for 5 seconds, that's like a refresher. And then the music becomes like interesting again when you come back.
Yeah, sometimes having those visuals allow the viewer's attention to kind of be distracted on something else, so that when it comes back to that main groove or whatever it is, like you said, it refreshes your senses in a way.
Right.
Yeah. Do you see yourself as kind of like more and more these days as like an audiovisual package? So more than just.
I would love to, but I don't, because I don't have the time right now to dedicate it, because I've been doing music, like that's my thing. Visuals is mostly something that's very recent for me, and I just don't have the time to get good enough for something that I would love to, That's why I use other people's amazing work that I am legally allowed to use, because my train of thought was like, why, I'm not at a point in which I can do cool stuff with code and like visuals and all this crazy stuff. So I can just reach out to people that were doing really cool stuff 50 years ago, or 60 or 40, whatever. And that for me is also like this homage kind of like perspective about it, is like, well, I don't have to do everything, Other people have done amazing stuff that I can use, and I can just stand on the giants.
The first kind of real question about the music of the track is that initial kind of almost chopped strings coming in and out, and you kind of come back to it at the end.
Yeah.
What's the actual signal flow for that? What are you doing with that? How are you doing that?
I love that question, because that is the first part. That string section is all made in the DAW. I use a specific library of orchestral recordings, and I use MIDI, and I program it. I sequence it, everything in MIDI, and like with expression and all these things going on. Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of thing I was telling at the beginning, because doing that in the modular would be just, one, insanely expensive, and two, probably, more difficult than I can handle. That's exactly what I was saying, because that's the hybrid, like power, like best of both worlds that I'm trying to understand more, because there's each system is good for one thing. And what I'm learning now is how can I harness the power of these things, right? And so doing some crazy glitchy stuff using digital samplers, like you can do it, but analog is it just shines for non-linear, crazy, glitch the hell out of a sample or whatever, right? Because you have live modulation and modulating the modulators and whatnot, So I'm still learning how to bring these two things together in like its shining version. How can I take something really traditionally Western, cute, harmonic, almost Baroque kind of like thing, and embed that in some noise, just mind fucking like, noise, and make it work together.
And that's super interesting, because when you started playing your piece, I was like, that's what he's trying to do.
You achieved.
It was very successful.
Thank you.
Just always nice. Oh, once again, it worked. Okay, great.
Great piece. I loved it. And one of the first things that really popped up when I was listening to it was there was very specific section where there was like overdrive in it, and I was just wondering how you're achieving that. I
am using external effects out of the rig. There's like two layers. One is external effects, and that is using some cheap pedals, because for the whole aesthetics, having shitty circuitry sometimes is good for the kind of sound I'm going to, right?
Clipping and stuff, yeah.
The second thing that I think addresses that question is I am exploring a lot of self-patching and a lot of feedbacking. And so one of the main like noisy, crazy stuff happening in this patch is the Ruina. So the Ruina distortion module self-patched. And I discovered that if I self-patch it, I don't even need an input for that module to work. It just generates such a crazy feedback loop. And then you can modulate it really cool with some of the other parameters. And so half of it, I would say the overtones, like the simple, like harmonic, like content, crazy, stuff going on, that's pedals. But then the core of the crazy, just destroying the sound, is all self-patching either effects or oscillators. So I'm self-patching the Ruina, the noise engineering arena, and I'm also self-patching the ZPO, which is an oscillator. So one effect is being self-patched, one oscillator is being self-patched, and then all that stuff runs into the herb. So I have a split signal, and so I have the clean signal, like the dry signal, and then the wet signal, and the wet signal is all going through the herb, which is just this amazing like piece of equipment. And the decay parameter, it's such an interesting thing because you can decay to infinite, and once you decay to infinite, all this crazy feedback stuff starts happening in the background, and that is kind of like the two sort of like streets where all the overtone distortion stuff is coming from.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's
very
really cool.
I'm not sure if the herbs, like, there's a relationship to the circuitry between that and the Mimeophone, I think.
I think the Mimeophone, like DSP algorithms, are also designed by Tom Erb.
Yeah, that's right. That's
This guy is part from the UCSD music department. I did my PhD in UCSD, and so I had the luck to meet. I didn't meet Tom Erb, but I did meet Miller Puckett, who made basically Pure Data that eventually became Max MSP. But Tom Erb,
I know what that is now because of our last week. Last week we had Piotr who let us in on that secret.
That is, I mean, it's such a powerful software, and this was developed, like the open source is Pure Data, and it was written originally by Miller Puckett. And this guy sits literally like 2 cubicles or 3 away from Tom Erb. I mean, the amount of DSP power in the UCSD Department of Music is just insane.
Now I want to ask a couple more questions about you more broadly. One of the first ones is what your process is. And by that, I mean, when you sit down, like sitting down in front of a rig and then expecting to like produce something out of it, there's 2 kinds of ways. It's either you're having a great afternoon and you want to sit there and noodle around and have fun, or sometimes you want to go and write and actually like write a track or something like that. And for me, that can be very daunting. So I'm wondering how you approach it. Where do you begin? Because that's I think sometimes a lot of people, especially who are just starting out, getting started is one of the biggest obstacles.
So the way I approach it is I have a certain number of techniques that I'm exploring, that I'm working on, and then I listen to music and I detect like, oh, this guy or this girl, like, they're doing this specifically, but in a better way, and they're using the VCA to modulate in like this crazy bass that I never do. Do I have the modules to do that? Okay, so I have a VCA, I have the oscillator, I have all this stuff. And so I try to go and replicate that, and so now I have like a new kind of like mini patch that works for me, right? And then I add other stuff. But then what I do is I get tired of the patch and I unpatch most of it except that kind of like red thread that I loved from the whole patch. And now that becomes like a static part of and then I build on that. And then I go back, and now on top of this thing, I'm going to build. Once I iterate that process the second time, now I have 2 red kind of like lines that I like, the first one and then the second one. So it's kind of like a very like Zen. I imagine it's like Zen because you kind of like go and you patch and then you unpatch, but you leave this thing that you liked. And then you repeat the process and then again and again and again. And then by the end, after like 5 or 6 iterations, you have a full patch that works together. That is it's the sum of all these red threads that you loved and you kept after the unpatching. I always imagine it in my mind like a coral, like the way corals grow. This is the chaotic thing, but then there's always like one line of growth and all the other stuff dies away, and there's all like what persists is always this one very traceable lineage of patches and sub patches that eventually work for me. And usually what I do with that is I try, if I like it enough, if it's not shitty, if it's not garbage, I try to make that into a song, and I study it and I go a little bit more in depth in like that final patch, and then I multi-track it and I mix it and all that stuff.
That's really interesting. You say that you study it, because I have a similar feeling where once I get something and I put it together and I learn something new about how my modules can interact with one another. And that's one of the things that's so attractive about modular is that you are always learning, even with modules, you may have had for quite a while. You're still learning new ways that they can kind of interact with each other.
I love that you say that, because one thing that I've been realizing very clearly in the past months is that not only can they talk to each other, but then they can talk to themselves. And that's where the whole self-patching world opened to my eyes that I haven't really understood.
Especially a lot of filters and a lot of stuff like
filters, self-oscillating kind of thing. But not only in the more traditional techniques, but in the more what happens if I plug in this to this, and then suddenly you get this massive wall of sound that you don't control, and then you tame it, and then you can use that in a patch, So I love that you say this thing talking to each other, because right now I'm moving kind of way to it. I'm some of the modules in the patch that you guys just saw, they're not even talking to each other. There's very little talk to each other. There's a lot of self-patching going on, precisely because I had never really explored this, because I was always in the mindset of let's make them talk to each other, which is also, it's amazing,
So maybe the last question I have is, Brooklyn needs a dedicated modular art space, half workshop, half gallery space, half performance. And I think, like me, you also kind of want to see our rigs not necessarily in what I'll call the gallery space, but in the gig space, in the music venue space. I feel like in many ways a modular is kind of confined to, think of Heinbach or any of these folks where they do it in a kind of gallery kind of setting. And on the one hand, I kind of feel like we can be protective of that. It's modular has its own kind of space that has kind of developed for people to kind of appreciate it in person. Aside from the whole streaming boom that's kind of happened since the pandemic, I'm wondering, I also kind of feel like we ought to kind of figure out ways to make it, I think you can have it out in the world without it losing its kind of experimental quality that I think modular has. Yeah. And so I'm wondering is, what do you think, now that things are opening up and we're going to start seeing a lot more music venues, and I don't know, maybe it's just the way I've perceived things, because since the pandemic, I've gotten so much more involved in participating in modular communities. So perhaps it just seems like it's grown or it's bigger, when in fact I've just actually kind of stepped into a community that's already been vibrant. But from what I can gather, I think that's pretty much a consensus that there has been this kind of boom in modular performance because of what streaming has afforded us. Yeah. And so now I'm wondering is how that looks, not just in, a bunch of modular synthesists are going to go watch another modular synthesist play music, yeah, but rather, going out into Pete's Candy Store or any of the kind of, $5 cover venues out there in Brooklyn and the rest of New York, and around the country, I guess. And I'd really like to see that happen. And I'm wondering, if you have any thoughts on that whole.
The things that come to my mind is, yes, I think there has been an explosion in the people doing modular, and that's always good, because then it gets demystified and it gets I don't know how to say it becomes less of an elite gallery kind of thing, right? And so it started as an academic project in the 50s and the 60s. I mean, that's its origin, but I feel that there's a supply and a demand for modular-based electronic music, right? And so in terms of the demand, I feel like people need to understand that a modular synthesizer can also do something else than noise and bleeps and blobs, that it can do cool, trippy, dancey electronic music. And that is something that as people understand it more, it's going to get demystified and it's going to become less of a gallery kind of thing and more of a club, bar kind of thing, right? On the supply side, I think there needs to be a little bit of less, I wouldn't say gatekeeping, but a notion that making some types of electronic music is undesirable, or and I think that's going to benefit the community, because right now we are the artists and we are the audience, which is amazing, but it's nice also to have more diversity in the people that are the audience, and that's going to benefit electronic musicians also, people that are not into hardware, because it demystifies hardware in a way that people that only use DAWs are going to start using hardware, and maybe they start using modular, and the more the merrier kind of thing. So I think of it as a supply and demand, and we as artists have a certain responsibility in terms of the supply side and shaping the demand and demystifying modular. One of the things I want to do here in New York, that I want to coordinate with people at the NIMS, the New York Modular Society server. I would love to do modular on the spot here in Brooklyn somewhere. So I'm thinking of buying a mobile battery and just go to the park here a few blocks away from my house and just sit down there, a few speakers, and then just do stuff. And you're going to have kids approaching and people like, oh, what is this? And then you explain. And, I just love the idea of socializing modular like that. And I think the modular on the spot idea, the original one, was very powerful to this kind of stuff. And that's something that I would like to explore here in New York.
It's going to be really interesting going forward to seeing how, but I just think the idea of going to the park and just starting to play and watching people come up and be like, what are you doing? It's like a really good idea. I think, like I said, powerful, real powerful.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's going to be it for us, guys. It's a great conversation. Love to keep it going all night. But now it's time for plugs, is what time it is. Carnal Ex, I'm hoping that some people who are watching the show has never heard. This is the first they're hearing of your music, that it's getting out to more people. Where can people hear you play? Where can they learn more about what you're doing? Give us some plugs. Plug some stuff.
Absolutely. So the digital venue where I'm most active nowadays is on Instagram. It's carnalex_. I love, there's a Discord server that I'm very active at, which is called the Earth Modular Society server. And I'm pretty active there. And there's a bunch of amazing, talented, focused, synthesis there. So if anybody in the audience has, the curiosity, or simply is an expert already and wants to, talk in a messy, chaotic environment with other synthesists, Earth Modular Society is amazing. It's very easy. We have a website, and we have Discord channels, and we have Instagram accounts. So that's Earth Modular Society. That's just amazing. Left Coast Lights on the West Coast is an amazing Discord channel with people from the Bay Area. You have people like Frank Martin and Malarkey and Alpha Stair and a bunch of other people that are doing amazing music and just pushing the community forward. So Left Coast Light is also another Discord channel that I would encourage you guys to check out. And then of course my home Discord channel is New York Modular Society. Super amazing community with helpful people. Everybody knows a lot. Each Discord server has its own personality. Some are more to taste for some, and some are more chaotic, some are more structured, but all these have amazing, amazing resources. So I encourage everybody to just check them out.
Well, next for us is going to be next Saturday, and we are super excited to have Woke Ass Messiah himself.
Amazing.
As amazing as that name. He's gonna be on the show. We're really looking forward to that. And actually, next episode's gonna be our last one before we're going a bit of a hiatus, because I will be caring for an infant child and will be even more sleep deprived and vomit covered than I typically am. But we will be back. So it's going to be the last one for just a little while. So be looking for it. Get excited about it, because we're going to be excited about it. We have several stops. We're going to try to pull them all out. So, Frederick.
Yeah. Thanks. I was going to say I have a few videos already lined up for the hiatus. We really think about the next episode as like the season finale. And rest assured there'll be plenty more content on the way.
There will be more content. Don't you worry, internet.
Speaking of next week, I'll be on the road. I'm going to be taking a road trip down to Atlanta. And so look out, ATL. I'm going to bring my synth on the road. We're going to see if I can, do something out of my house and see what kind of noises we can make down south. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank Carnal Ex for being here. As always, when we invite people here, it's really because we genuinely love their work. And so you're someone who has lived up, not only you as a person and as a conversationalist, has been fantastic. And so we really just appreciate you taking your time to be with us. And hopefully we get your sounds in front of more ears. And we wish you all the luck. We'll be following you for sure. And I'll run into you at Earth Modular Society. Yeah.
And next time you come on the show, you have to come on again and play the bass.
Oh yeah, exactly. I love it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for having me, guys. This was super fun. I love talking with you guys. So many good ideas. And thank you. I'll see you guys again.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for us this week, guys. Thank you for everyone coming. Thanks for Carnal Ex for coming. Thanks for the audience to come. And thank you, Frederick Foxtrott, for making all this possible with your talent and your hard work and your roguish good looks. So that's going to be it for us tonight. We'll see you next week, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. I don't give a fuck.